Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host for Sales and Cigars. I've got another great episode today with our guest is Shawn Casemore. Shawn has just recently written his second book. It's called The Unstoppable Sales Machine. We talk a little bit about why he wrote it and what the value is to his reader. We talk a little bit about transformation around sales culture and why sales coaching is sometimes a problem and what we can do as sales managers and sales leaders to correct that. And it's a great conversation with some really practical advice for you to take away and go apply it. Would love to hear any feedback that you have from success that when you've tried one of these little nuggets that come out of this episode. I apologize, I'm a little hoarse. I have COVID, and I'm just trying to muscle through it. So Shawn made that easy in our episode. So go grab a cocktail, grab a cigar, strap in for another great episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. So Shawn, thanks for taking some time out of your schedule. I know you've got a bunch of things going on right now with the book, which we'll get to, but thank you for jumping on the podcast.
Yeah, Walter, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So you're one of the last couple of weeks. I've done some recordings with like 3 different Canadians. So you're I'm starting to have a trend of
I guess I'll have to try. I'll try and say a and a boot. What else? Process. Yeah, process. Instead of process. Yeah, I'll throw them all in here somehow.
Okay, so hey, let's kind of jump in. I've kind of done a little research on some of the work you do and services you provide. And I kind of want your input on sales culture. And when a company is struggling with their culture or they're trying to improve it, and improving it can mean a bunch of different things. But what are your thoughts about that? What's your approach to helping somebody drive transformation with their sales culture?
Well, I'd be amiss if I didn't say that it's going to depend, obviously, on the organization and the people involved. But that aside, I'll give you an example. I was working with a client last week, sales leader, sales vice president, very direct, very competitive, right? So on the scale of the whole realm of behaviors, definitely a driver, a disc would call it a high D, that kind of thing. And there's a lot of people in sales that are like that because sales, a lot of times you have to be independently driven and results focused. Now, that said, he had a team of people that were similar and a few people that were different. Some people that were more analytical, which means slower to respond, a lot more detail oriented, all of those things. So long story short, he was very frustrated with the people that had a different behavior and style than his. But it comes out in the fact that they work differently. Their results are differently. And therefore, that was his interpretation. So what I shared with them is that, look, you've got to look across sales and selling as a whole and say, well, here's the people I have working for me. And they have certain skill sets that they're strong at, right? But they also have behaviors that are natural to them. So when you build a sales culture, a sales team, whether it's 3 people or 300, you've got to be looking across and taking a look at each individual and putting them in roles that they can be successful in. So, for example, in his case, the highly analytical person I'm thinking of was very good at researching leads and pre-qualifying. Rarely, so spent a lot of time finding leads, but those leads were always bang on. Whereas the person that was less detail-oriented, more get out there and make it happen, was constantly burning time talking to people that weren't qualified leads. So I said, what if you made some adjustments to let this one individual do the research, get the lead, and let the other person run with it, right? So that's a very simple version, and depending on the size of the company, obviously it would change a bit. But sales culture is looking not just at process, but it's also looking at the people, their behaviors and their natural talents, but behaviors, because that's where we come from, right? And then trying to align with that to get the most from them. And then guess what? They end up enjoying their job as a result because they're doing something they enjoy, and they stick around.
Yeah, it kind of the responsibility of a sales leader, much like it's the responsibility of a salesperson when they're in front of a prospect or a customer, that we need to be whoever they need us to be
Yeah.
in that moment, right? We need
Yeah.
to adjust to them. And it applies to when we're trying to manage and motivate and coach
Yeah.
salespeople, I think.
Yeah.
Um, where I've seen trouble, and I'd be interested in your take on this, where there's a charismatic CEO who's comes from the sales department. Um, he's been promoted to this role over time. He's earned the role. He was very successful in sales, um, and he wants everybody to be happy.
Yeah.
He wants everybody to be like, sitting down and singing "Kumbaya" around the fire every night, and um, that type of leader that permeates through the whole organization, and it is a real challenge to create accountability with some level of consequence in that environment, right? Where that leader really struggled with, let's make accountability positive. Let's give everybody fair expectations and make sure they understand what they need to do and they have the support to do it. But at some point, they're either executing on it or they're not, and we can help them with the why, right? Either saying the wrong things or they need some skills set up. But
Yeah.
to me, that's one of the biggest challenges is when that leader is in the way of meaning well, right? He wants everybody to be happy.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But it gets in the way of creating that high performance culture where, I don't know, to me, we got to be. I love a sales meeting when you walk in to the sales room and the salespeople are talking smack back and forth, and it's all competitive and good natured, um, and they're fighting for each other, and they're not letting not each other slide, but they're all trying to be better.
Yeah.
Um, and I see that kind of leadership mentality get in the way of that. You have any experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would add a couple of points. I agree with exactly what you're saying, Walter. And I think when it comes to if you look at a CEO, right, any strong leader at that level or at any level where you have the opportunity to hire other leaders. So any strong leader recognizes their gaps in maybe their own behaviors, their own performance, and they surround themselves with people that fill those voids. So as a CEO, I always look to the executive leadership team or the senior leadership team to say, okay, if he's kumbaya, does he have somebody else's crack in the whip? Because between the two of them, if they get along and work well together, they can create that balance as necessary. But I think if you take it down to the sales team, or maybe there's a sales leader that's that way, but not so much anybody reporting into them other than the team itself, then you have to rely on the team members. When I used to lead teams in different sales teams, I knew that, for example, I'm a little bit of a driver sometimes, and that works well for some people. You can be pretty direct and blunt and focus on the results. Other people, it rubs them the wrong way. So I used to find other people on the team that were maybe a little less direct as I was, and I would kind of communicate with and through the team. So if I wanted to explain something I knew was getting me fired up that might rub some people the wrong way, I'd say, you know what? Let's let Sarah, who I talked to before the meeting, Sarah's going to explain it because I don't know if it's going to come out the right way. So Sarah would explain it, and then I might jump in and add a few things. So you have to look to the people around you as a leader and say, well, where are my weaknesses when it comes to building out a strong team, and how do I supplement that? Whether it's with other leaders that work, report to me, or it's just with people on my team. There was one gentleman named Bob years ago I worked with, and was trying to get this team on board. I was new to leading the team, and every meeting we'd have a meeting, we go in, I talk about all this stuff, and at the end Bob would pull out, I don't have it here, just like a stack of papers and say, okay, what are you doing about this? Nothing. What are you doing about this? And he would go through, and I felt like an idiot. So I said, okay, I got to start to go to Bob ahead of the meeting, because they would just all turn and listen to Bob. So I started saying, Bob, here's my agenda, what do you think? Hey, do you want to speak to that one? Because can you help me with this one? And all of a sudden Bob became more positive, and it became more of a team environment, because I was realizing Bob is filling a void I'm not, right? So I think that's the key to overcoming that. As a leader, you have to recognize your strengths and your weaknesses.
No, that's a great point, and it occurred to me. I had a team of about 6 at one point in my career, and I would try to get different members of the team to participate in the meeting, right, and
Yeah.
lead a piece of it. right? And depending upon what it was, there was always somebody I could pull to and give them enough time to prepare, help them if they needed it,
Yeah.
but let them teach this idea or share how they had done something that we could use, other people in the team could use. And it it took some load off of me as a manager to not have to prepare every little detail,
Yeah.
but it exactly what you said was part of the result. The rest of the team paid attention, they were engaged, and it felt more like a team rather than a hierarchical dissertation from one person.
Yeah,
It's
well, and
a
it's not much different than sales. I mean, the goal in sales is that if you were a buyer, a prospect that I'm speaking to, and we're trying to, have a discovery discussion here and figure out how I might be able to help you, the goal is that whatever idea we come up with is your idea, but that I can support, right? That's my end goal. I don't want it to be my idea. I want it to be your idea.
right,
Well, it's no different than leading a team. I used to stand there, you'd be looking at a situation. Maybe it's, let's say you're trying to overcome, somebody's complaining about an objection, they can't get past the objection, and you're sitting there based on your experience and background, you're thinking, I know exactly what they need to be doing. You can't say that. So you're sitting there.
right,
For me, I'd be biting my lip going, come on, somebody's, hey, what does everybody else think? And oh, I got to share. And then finally somebody would say what I'm thinking. I think that's a great idea, right? Because now it's their idea, and they're more apt to listen to them than me, let's be honest. So it's that same mentality. And to you, I think you were alluding to this earlier, Walter. If you're successful in sales and you enjoy working with a group of people, if you want to be the cowboy, that's fine, go to it. But if you enjoy working with other people and you're successful in sales, aka influencing customers and influencing buyers, there's a good chance you may be also effective as a leader, because there's a lot of similarities between the two.
there really is. And when I work with sales managers, that's one of the things that I try to get them to see. Just think of the team as your customer,
Yeah, yeah,
and you have to put your ego in the pocket, right, or leave it outside of the room when you have those conversations, and then you just work that the same way. It's like discovery.
yeah,
You're asking the questions, because if it's their idea, as you said earlier, it's going to be very difficult for them to argue with themselves.
exactly,
Um,
exactly.
is and the same applies internally, I think, as a manager. And it's one of the things that I remember. I The first time I was asked to become a manager because of the promoted, um, it happened at a Christmas party. I was working for a Canadian company, as a matter of fact, and they pulled me. They say, "Hey, can we meet? Can you come up to the bar? We want to talk to you." And I remember I looked at my wife and I said, "This is either going to be really good or really bad. So get your coat." Um, and they offered me this role, blah blah blah, and I accepted it. And I'm driving home with her, and I was explaining to her, what all the details were going to be, and she's like, "Have have you ever managed a team before? Have you ever managed anything before?" And I'm like, "No, no." She's like, "What are you going to do?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'll figure it out, right? Because
Yeah,
it's what I have to do."
yeah,
And it was, I talked to a mentor of mine, and that's what he had said to me, was like, just think about it as sales, and you're just trying to help these people just like you do with your customers. You just got to make it their idea.
yeah.
So that's really great advice that you offer. Hopefully the our listeners can put that into play.
Yeah, and the number one feedback or point that I get raised if I'm to position it in that manner, right, to a sales leader, is, what are you saying? I have to change who I am, right? I got into this role because of my success. I mean, no, don't change who you are, but recognize that if you want the team to be effective, you have to sell them on it, right? And how I sell this person versus that person, but there's going to be some similarities and going to be some differences. No different, right, than dealing with your customer. It's the exact same idea. So I think it's a good way to put it. Keeps it succinct and makes it easy to understand. And if you're stuck on the idea that, hey, it's my team, I shouldn't have to change. Well, do you have to change when your behavior and your approach when you're trying to sell a customer? Yeah. Why? Because they're not you. They're different than you. They've got different priorities. Well, to some extent, it's very similar on your team.
Yeah, it's really a something that I think people have to um, they can recognize it intellectually, but they have to really practice it, just like anything else,
Yeah.
and work on it. And it's constant because it's. I mean, there's certain days you can't bring your baggage to the party that day, right? Your customers don't care if you're having a bad day or if you got COVID or whatever, right? It's
Yeah.
you got to be who you got to be.
Yeah.
Um, so the other topic I wanted to try to cover with you is coaching, and I think a lot of companies talk about we want our people to coach, we want our sales managers to coach our team, um, but that's about the extent of the support that they give um, to their sales managers and to their leaders. Um, so when you run into a situation like that, are you building a framework for them to work off of? Are you trying to get them to think about? Because I see it this way, and I'm just going to share this part. And you
Sure.
can speak to it.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people doing coaching more about manipulating their people rather than really trying to help them uncover and unpack something to get better.
Yeah.
So what's your approach when you're trying to get somebody to be a better coach?
Well, and I'll give you
I know it's a loaded question.
yeah, no. I'll give you the Coles Notes version, and then we can dissect it from there if it makes sense. But to me, a good coach asks good questions. I'm going to be going out tonight to coach my youngest son's baseball team, which I've been doing for quite a while. And if I find if somebody's stepping up to bat, and again, you might say, well, these are children. Coaching is coaching. If somebody's stepping up to bat and they're not doing well, maybe they strike out, they come back and they're upset about it. I don't say to them, well, you could do better next time, pat them on the back, because if they're already frustrated, I think even kids recognize I'm trying to pull the wool over their eyes. So to me, it's
Right.
good questions. I would say, well, let me ask you, you were up there. What would you do differently if you could do that all over again? Right. So when it comes to coaching sales professionals or any other professional, I coach CEOs in some cases of small businesses. It's about good questions, because most people recognize what they should have done or should be doing. Right. But it's a matter of you have to bring it to their attention, make them aware of it. That's step one. Once they're aware that, okay, this maybe could be improved, changed, approached differently, whatever the situation might be, then it's a matter of, okay, let's discuss some steps to doing so. So when I'm working with a sales leader, what I'm trying to do, typically the steps are, step one, understand the individual. We talked a little bit about that. Recognize everybody in your team has a different behavior, different personality, different background, different experiences. And that means you're going to have to make a few adjustments for each person if you want that communication to be effective. Step two, listen. Right? Ensure that you're not jumping in and jumping to conclusions. And sometimes if that's your behavior, that means counting. So if you ask a question, I want you to count slowly to 5 before you answer. If they say nothing, don't worry about it. Still count slow to 5. Give them that chance. And then it is, that is coupled with good questions with the understanding. And again, sales leaders, sales professionals are goal driven. So if you give them, the goal is to get the individual to recognize what needs to it's not for you to tell them. They have to recognize it. I can tell you, sit down, but if you don't want to sit down, there's no reason to, you're probably not going to listen to me. You have to recognize why sitting down right now is something you need to do. And the only way I can get there is by asking you, aren't your legs tired? Haven't you been standing for quite a while? There's a recent study that showed if you stand for more than 2 hours, it can cause problems later in life with your knees. And also you think, wow, I should sit down. Well, I didn't tell you to sit. I asked you some good questions, shared some information, some real factual information, not my sense is, or I've got an instinct that, right? It's factual information that they can grasp and say, okay, this is validated information. This isn't just Shawn's opinion. And then that helps them to make the decision to change, because the outcome of good coaching is change, right? A change in behavior, a change in approach. But to get there, you're dealing with human beings who are all very different and unique. So at a simple level, that's the framework that I use. But it's very much using different tools and different approaches and et cetera. And it really depends on the sales leader. What's there? So some people are naturally good coaches. I'm working with a gentleman who's a school teacher by day and does all sorts of coaching, hockey, baseball, you name it. And he's an amazing coach. He works with kids all the time and they're receptive to him. It's just part of his personality and his skill set that he's effective. But I meet other people that aren't, right? So at a high level, that would be my answer.
No, that's great insight. it's really, it's asking a question. It's asking a question you really don't know the answer to, and then listening for that person to think about it, and then give some sort of thoughtful response, and to try to help uncover that, because it's a mindset thing often, right? I think mindset is harder to change than skills, and if they don't see that they have a challenge or a weakness, then you're just going to keep banging your head up against the
Exactly.
wall as a coach.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a was a quote from Tom Landry. I don't know how much NFL football you remember, but Tom Landry was a fairly successful Dallas Cowboy coach, and his idea of coaching was like, helping. I'm going to screw up the quote, but it was basically helping people see the things that they don't want to see, and helping them understand the things that they don't want to understand, so they can become the person that the coach always knew they could be.
Yeah.
But it's a process, right? And you got it. It's different for one player than the next.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Some people need a different path. So that's really great. That's really great insight. I appreciate that.
And I'll just add where the question point came from is I had somebody say to me years ago that I asked them a question about something they were doing, some of their activities, prospecting. And I said, well, what about this? And there was a long pause, and the individual I was coaching, she said, that's a really good coach question, sales coach question, right? And again, this is years ago. And then I realized, all I'm doing is asking questions, but that's how, even as a leader of a team myself, that's how I get people to recognize their current behavior and that maybe it needs to change. And then you can start to focus on, well, how might we explore what that change looks like? So,
yeah, it's when we try to complicate things, I think it gets messy, and people feel uncomfortable, and it feels too structured. The best coaching conversations I've had are typically pretty short, all things being equal, and you almost see the light bulb go off, right, and then you can follow up with them to see how they've taken that idea and tried to apply it to something, because that's where it really, the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So let's talk about, you launched a book, and I think it launched yesterday.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's talk about let's talk about the unstoppable sales machine, and why you wrote it. And I know you're not going to be able to encapsulate the whole book in 5 minutes, but let's talk about why you did it and why people might find it helpful.
Sure. So the book previous to this that I wrote was called The Unstoppable Organization. It came out in 2017, and it was my approach at writing what I'd found in the world of sales is that oftentimes the sales people, the sales teams aren't supported. The rest of the organization lets things drop. And that can be due to just poor service, poor experience, poor culture. And then you lose customers in the first department you point your finger at, sales. So it talked really about building the infrastructure of any company, build up a group of people that are all really focused on sales, right? That sales driven mentality. But then I realized when 2020 came and COVID began, and everybody was forced in sales to move to a computer, and for many it was a whole new environment, right? They couldn't sell face to face. I was working with a lot of companies to help the individuals and teams recognize, well, how do I transition these skills in person into this kind of environment where we're virtual? So what I tried to do is encapsulate a lot of those experiences in how sales has evolved since 2020. I mean, it's been changing for years, but it's accelerated tenfold when COVID came along, as far as the adaptation of technology. That Gartner study that suggested that, to no surprise in the B2B world, buyers are spending more and more time researching before they ever engage with sales, which means sales have less and less of a time to sit back and have a cigar and have a the days of those, unfortunately, are getting shorter and shorter depending on the demographic of your buyer. So the book was really designed around techniques, strategies, process, and how to sell today. How can an organization or even an individual organize themselves to create this unstoppable sales, right? Because if you do the right things and you have the right structure in place, you can create that environment. Get away from the whole ebb and flow of, things slow down. So I get out there and I bang the phones, I meet with people, I get some business, and then things slow down again because why? Because I relaxed. I thought, oh yeah, no problem. I got some business now. I can take it easy. And then, oh my gosh, I got to jump back on it. So it gets away from those ebbs and flows and takes modern selling, if you will, and I structure it in a way that you can step through the book and implement this again, whether you're leading a company or whether you're a sales professional or leading a sales team. You can use this in order to structure the process. The book I'm actually working on right now that I just got signed, so it'll be out about a year from now, will be the Unstoppable Sales Team. It goes right into the culture piece you were talking about before. But yeah, this one is just out, and I'm pretty excited about it. And I think it highlights a lot of the trends and things that we're seeing today, and really how to use them to our advantage in order to sell more and get away from these ebbs and flows.
Yeah, you make a great point about how sales has changed over the last 20 years, but just in the last 3 to 5 years, where in the B2B world, I mean, if you're still thinking transactionally, if you're still thinking about, your product is better than the other product, and we have to have a much more consultative approach where we're trying to understand if we can even help these people, right? And are they qualified to work with us? I sort of flip it. The way I was trained is to really try to make sure that I'm not wasting their time or my time, and that we have some basic, that I have something that is of value to them, and then do they recognize that value, and then can I create the right environment for them to see that, yeah, this is something that's going to help me solve these 3 problems. And there's still a lot of folks out there that are selling transactionally, and gone are the days where they need us for information. It's about creating value and urgency, and helping them see that there's this might be a better solution to what they're doing, because status quo has always been, I think, our biggest competition.
Yeah, and I discuss in the book, and to your point, Walter, kind of that transition of the sales professional. The way I define it is, if you're thinking about yourself as a sales professional, you should think about yourself as a sales concierge, meaning that almost regardless of what you're selling, there's so much information out there, right? If anything, we're overwhelmed. And if you start looking around, even at Googling, you want to buy a widget, you'll find so much information. And a lot of buyers, they don't have time to do all this research. Then they're going to internal teams of people who are influencing the buy, and they've all got their research. And it's a mess. So sales professionals, again, I'll be a little bit facetious here, but it's really today about, taking somebody's hand and saying, look, let me help you. Let me show you what's relevant to your needs, what's not. So it's a little bit of, consultative selling, if you will, understanding their needs, but also guiding the buyer through this buyer journey that has become so convoluted. And that's why you'll see in many cases, and probably your audience sees this as well, is you're reaching out, you have a good conversation, and the person disappears. And if they come back, it's like, now I want 32 of them yesterday. Well, why? Why is everybody not giving me time to produce this or to deliver this? They want it yesterday because the buying decision took way too long. So we need to ensure that when we present ourselves, it's in a matter of, I'm here to help, and I'm here to help guide you through this sea of information you're going to see, because they don't want to go through it. They just want somebody to say, help me. I don't know what's relevant here, right? So I talk a lot about, that shift that's happening to the role of salespeople.
The concierge concept is a great metaphor for that, because what you're doing is you're making it easier. That's what a concierge does. Makes it easier to get the ticket, or to get the table at the restaurant, or just to know where to go.
Exactly.
And the buyer is reticent to say, help me, I'm confused, right? Because they don't want to see that weakness.
Exactly.
And it's getting them to feel comfortable that this process is going to be simpler. I think this, what popped into my head when you said concierge was, I used to sell a commodity that nobody wanted to buy, but they had to buy. And I was a small company, and I sold against little companies like Siemens and Honeywell and Tyco. And I remember I would say to the prospects, it's like, look, what I do and what they do, 98% of it, exactly the same. Exactly the same. So can we talk about the 2%? And then all of a sudden they were like, felt like there wasn't going to be this whole conversation about my widget's better than their widget, right? And then all I did at that point was ask the questions like, what's important to them? What are they concerned about? What do they care about? And then I could tailor my solution to fit their needs. But it was always the little tiny things that seemed inconsequential, but was really what was going to drive the sale. And it was all about helping them, not about pushing something or manipulating.
Well, and I think taking that even a step further and recognizing that, fortunately or unfortunately, there's a lot of turnover in every role. Sales is no different. So you could use that exact same approach and say, well, they're 98% similar. The 2% is different. I'd like to talk about that. And I said, what is the 2% difference, or 5%, or whatever it is? It's me. I've been working with this company for X number of years. A lot of my competition, you'll see one person today and somebody different in 6 months, right? I'm here for you. You can call me anytime. Here's my direct, like even that, because it addresses the concerns buyers have about, okay, what if I come to a conclusion 7:00 Friday night? I always tell the salespeople I work with, look, it's completely your decision. But to me, responsiveness is a competitive advantage in today's environment. So if you're comfortable and you're okay doing some stuff after hours, and some people aren't, and that's fine. But what I say to those that aren't is I'm 100% confident. If you took an after hours call or a weekend call and you go to your boss next week and say, I spent 2 hours with this client on the phone, I moved them forward on Saturday, could I leave 2 hours early Friday? Pretty sure most bosses will say, yeah, go ahead, right? They're not going to hold you to your desk. So I think we're in an environment where if the concierge idea, it requires a little more effort, maybe. And by effort, I just mean being available at different times, being more responsive. But you can go back to your employer typically and get that time back, because as long as you're focusing on selling, they don't care. They realize buyers are coming to conclusions at 8:00 at night. And if I can jump on that email first, that demonstrates, hey, if you're getting this now and you haven't even bought from me, what's it going to be like when you actually invest in our product or service?
Exactly. Yeah, it's about providing value, and what that value is whatever they think it is, and we have to be able to support that within reason, right? But I think it is something that if we do a good job in sales, we're making a very nice living, and we're doing it. We should be doing it. It should be fun, right? Because if you're doing it right, it's fun. Sometimes you're playing golf at 2:00 on a Friday, and sometimes at 5:00 you're on the phone, working through a challenge for a customer to solve a problem. It is what it is.
Exactly.
It goes around, comes around. So,
absolutely.
So where can people find the book? What's the best?
Probably Amazon is probably the most straightforward. If you just go to Amazon and look up Unstoppable Sales Machine, it will pop up. I'll tell you right now, unless this changes in the near future here, the hardcover price, they've got pegged at like $150. My guess is they don't want to print hardcover, but you can get paperback. I think it's $30 or $24. It's on Kindle, and I think on audiobooks to come. So Amazon would be your quickest bet.
All right. So I'll have all of that in the show notes for people to look up both books, and they can search by your name or can search by the titles. Amazon does a pretty good job of, because that's what they started doing, right? Is selling. Yep, that's how we started, with selling books.
That's
right?
how Amazon started. Yep, believe it or not. Although we get everything from toilet paper to mouthwash there now, and they started with books.
Yeah, it was like, where did you buy that? Somebody asked me, I'm like, well, what do you mean, where did I buy it? I bought it on Amazon.
Yeah.
I don't go to the store.
Who does that? Yeah.
It's just crazy. All right. So let's land on this idea. I always ask, if the guest has any relationship with cigars, and I'm just curious. Canada has a little advantage over us in that you can get some overpriced Cuban cigars there, but do you have a relationship?
Yes. So, and I can't say I smoke cigars a lot nowadays. However, growing up, my father smoked old port wine tipped, not really a pure cigar, more of a cigarello, but he smoked those till I was probably 16 years old. He quit, has never gone back. But if I ever explore, I tend to, I can't find Old Port that often, but I tend to go with the Captain Blacks periodically if I'm enjoying myself somewhere. Again, I can't say I can even tolerate the whole thing. The impact is a little more than I'm used to, but nonetheless, it always brings my wife's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "This just remind me of growing up. This is what my dad did, right? He would driving in his car, window down. That's what he did." So fortunately, he's still around. He's almost 80 now. But yeah, he gave them up a long time
Oh,
ago. But growing up, that was quite common.
you know, I ask that question to every guest, and you'd be surprised how many people have a story that's about a
Yeah,
memory, right? It's a fond memory of something in their past. And I know that it's not politically correct or any of that stuff. Cigars are not, but there was a time where that's a smell or a taste or just the idea brings back a smile to
yeah,
somebody's face.
yeah.
Um, and I've had quite a few ladies on the as a guest who speak very fondly of like memories of their grandfather or their father. Sometimes it's a pipe,
Yeah.
um, but that idea just takes you instantly back to that moment, sitting with there and spending time with that individual.
Yeah,
So I appreciate you
yeah,
sharing
no
that.
problem.
Thank you. Um, all right, I appreciate you taking this time. I wish you well with the book, and thanks for
Yeah,
being a guest, Sean.
Walter. Yeah, I
Appreciate it.
really appreciate the opportunity, Walter, and looking forward to staying connected.